विभोर मैं ट्राई कर रहा था यार तुमको रीच करने का, वो वीडियो चला सकते हो क्या, पॉसिबल है तो? हाँ
Hello.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, Justice Srikrishna, to today's session of Gyan Sabha with DIYA Mumbai.
Yeah,
Extend a very warm welcome to you, sir.
thank you.
Uh, and before we move on to today's session, we would like to just set a context of what the topic is for today,
Yeah,
and why is it important in today's time to discuss this topic uh, from the perspective of an average Indian, from the perspective of an average individual. Before that, I'll just briefly set the context of what DIA is and what it does, and how did the concept of Gyan Sabha started. So DIA is basically the youth wing of All World Gayatri Parivar, which was set up by Pandit Sriram Sharma Acharya ji. And this was set up in the year 1926, uh, when Acharya ji embarked upon a journey of spirituality, of being a freedom fighter, of being a social reformer, and he played these many roles depending on the time. When there was a need to fight the British, he, under the guidance of Mahatma Gandhi, fought the British, and then he set up an organization whose uh, basis was man making and character building. And by this twinfold principle, he wanted to reach out to the very minutest unit, which is an individual. From an individual, we make a family. From a family, we make society. And from society, we make a nation. So his idea was to reach out to all classes and masses, or I'll be तो हम लोग कैसे एक ग्लोरिफाइड स्टेज पे ले जा सकते हैं जिससे कि हमारी जो कंट्री है वो स्ट्रेंथन हो. So that was the purpose. And the volunteers of DIA work on a twin-fold principle of donating their time and donating their resources. So uh, we do activities on Saturdays and Sundays when we have time from our respective professions. We do activities such as tree plantation, cleanliness drives. We go to educational institutes to sensitize about the need to have a value-based education and something which is really helpful rather than having bookish knowledge. So, and conducting seminars on healthcare and yoga and meditation and spirituality. Although spirituality is at the core, however, the activities of DIA are multifold. हम हर दिशा में काम करने का प्रयास करते हैं. And the concept of Gyan Sabha, Gyan means knowledge, and the concept of Gyan Sabha was conceptualized way back in the year 2006 under the tutelage and guidance of Shraddha Dr. Pranav Pandya ji, who is the present head of All World Gayatri Parivar. And since then, from various walks of life, such as Justice Gyan Mishra has come on this platform, Dr. Kiran Bedi, Vikas Amte, Prakash Amte, people from multiple fields have come on this platform, scientists, doctors, uh, advocates, engineers, and they've shared their thought on different topics, which some way or the other concern human psychology, human nature, and how do we take the country ahead or do our small bit in making the country a better place. So this is what the idea was behind DIA. And volunteers of DIA, sir, as I mentioned, they take out time from their personal and professional lives to conduct these activities. And on behalf of everyone, I once again extend you a warm welcome. And everyone who has just joined in, I welcome you all. And we have today with us Justice Srikrishna, who needs no introduction. I mean, as a former judge of the Supreme Court, as an arbitrator, as a practitioner during his time as a lawyer, are just some of his introductions, which we, in a sense, called are his physical introductions. But his benevolence, his compassion for human beings is well known to everyone. He has written books and articles which concern humanity in general. So that was the idea, sir, of inviting you today to this platform. that we have your wisdom and your years of experience from a neutral point of view कि कैसे इस country को and particularly most people joining today are young people. They are students and students from various walks of life. Not necessarily law students. We have law students. We have students of engineering, of management, and there are professionals from different streams who have joined us today. So, sir, it's a great honor for me. It's an absolute honor to have you today here, and I invite you to share your thoughts on this particular topic, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind introduction. Now, the topic of today's talk given to me, or rather, which I chose from the options given to me, was the responsibilities and liabilities of being a citizen of the country. This involves 3-4 concepts which need to be carefully analyzed. Now, what is a country? Now, if you ask anybody, what is India? The vast land of tract from Himalaya to Kanyakumari, from north to east, north to south, and from east Odisha to Gujarat Sea, Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal to Arabian Sea. That is just the landmass surrounded by mountain on one side and the sea on the other sides. So what is India? The heart of India is the culture, is the civilization of the human beings that reside in this tract. That is real India. Yes, we do have problems about hygiene, about the Chinese incursion, about the Pakistanis coming over and making trouble for us. That is obviously at a very material level. Now, every human being has two aspects. One is the material aspect, where the human being tries to acquire things for his day-to-day living, make it more convenient, be happy in the material surroundings. But that by itself is not an end, because our ancient wisdom says, Ahara nidra bhayamaithunani samanyametat pashubhir naranam dharmohitesham vicha dharmohichetam vishesha hetuhu dharmena hina pashubhis samana. So, the instinctive being, like instinct of hunger, instinct of sleep, instinct of fear, instinct of reproduction. This is there for human beings. This is also there for ordinary beasts. Animals also have this. So what is it that really distinguishes a human being from an animal? Are we really animals in that sense? So our ancient people said, Dharmohitesham vishesha hetu. There is some peculiar characteristic known as dharma, which distinguishes a human being from an animal and keeps him at a higher pedestal. Now, this is the greatness of this country, and this is the greatness which has been handed over to us for, I do not know, historians say it's 6,000 years, whatever the age, it is time from time immemorial as far as I can make out. Now, this concept of dharma is a very interesting thing for which I have not been able to find an equivalent in any other language, particularly language like English, which has very few nuances of this particular term. It's a very compendious term. When you use the word dharma in Sanskrit, it could mean quality, it could mean characteristic, it could mean right, it could mean ability, it could mean the way in which you live, it could mean the very essence of your life. Now, yes, the real definition given of dharma is dharma ityahuhu dharmo dharayate prajaha. So dharma is that which maintains, binds the human beings. It is the common platform on which human beings are able to sustain themselves. Aranat dharma ityahuhu dharmo dharayate prajaha. Therefore, it is essential for us to look at what is this that really binds us? What is it that really keeps us together? The entire society is bound together. Otherwise, we would all be absolutely, disseminated, each for himself. And as we all know, no human being is an island unto himself. So, what is this characteristic that has been handed over to us, and how are we able to apply that in our day-to-day life in order to make our life better individually, our life better in terms of a society, in terms of what we now define as a country. Now, I do as I told you, every human being has these two aspects. One is the spiritual, one is the material. Now, spiritual, people misunderstand spiritual to mean that it consists merely of puja, path, mantra, japa, and all that. No, spiritual is consider yourself as something other than mere material being. And when I say I am so and so, what am I really referring to? Am I really referring to the body? So if the body dies someday or the other, am I going to say that yes, it has come to an end, therefore there is nothing else to be done? That is materialism. But spiritualism is there is some spirit. Now, I don't want to call it, give the definition. The Indian philosophy uses various definitions. I will not take you into that. There is something higher which drives me to do all kinds of things, good, bad, irrelevant, indifferent, and I should be able to distinguish between them and then say, hey, I shall consciously refrain from doing this. I shall consciously follow this particular path. Why? Because it is good for me, it is good for my fellow beings. Now, one of those concepts is based on what we in English would call it as morality or ethics. There is a very interesting saying in Padma Purana. Padma Purana says, Suyata Dharma Sarvaswam Srutva 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 Chaiva Chaiva Avadharyatam Srutva Chaiva Avadharyatam Apmana Pratikulani Pareshamna Samacharet. Look at the simple rule that has been postulated. He said this is the essence of all the Dharma Shastra that has been taught for us from ages. Atmana Pratikulani Pareshamna Samacharet. Basic thing in life is whatever is bad for you, for heaven's sake, don't do it to the others. Now, if something is bad for me, it cannot be good for the other human. If I want to, please ensure that it is avoided for the next door neighbor or your own friend or anybody else in society. Now, the problem that we are facing today is on account of our inability to transmit this kind of thinking to the younger generation. We had, I would say, the generation which fought for freedom had idealistic method of working. They were working for freeing this country from foreign rule and imposition of foreign cultural norms. Once that generation went out, probably it includes me and my generation and subsequent generations, we have lost that zest. We have become complacent, and our children and grandchildren have not been passed on this glorious heritage that we had. A great Western philosopher said, education is the means by which the cultural tradition of one generation is passed on to another generation. Have we failed in that? Or have we not failed in that? Is a question that needs to be carefully considered. If today you find that there is more evil in society, more dishonesty, more corruption than what you would expect it to be 100 years ago, what is the cause for that? The cause for it is that we have been unable to pass on these glorious cultural norms to the successive generations. Now, when we talk of all this, we have to consider why has it happened? your rights and liabilities are interesting concepts. Every human being is born with what we call rights: right to live, right to be unmolested, right to be free, right to be able to take any decision. But there is a boundary beyond which he cannot act. As I remember, my law professor used to teach me in the first year of law that you can swing your arm as you want, except that it should stop at the tip of the neighbor's nose. That is the rule. Atmana pratikulani pareshanna samacharet is what the Sanskrit teaching was. Now, when we talk of why has it all? Now, I remember Vivekananda having read in Vivekananda's speeches, Swami Vivekananda said that right character or integrity of character is the product of good education. Now, do we have integrity of character across the board? Look, ultimately, I concede that anything other than God perhaps is not 100% perfect. It's partly good and partly bad. But then, how do we determine which is good or bad? Is by the number of factors which go. If it is more than 50% good, we would call it good. If it is less than 50% good, we would call it bad. Now, if you look at society as a whole, do you find it to be good? Do you think that every individual being is acting in a manner that is good for himself and for society, considered as a collective? It is not. I'm sorry to say that in my, God knows how many years I've lived so many, I'm very close to 80. In all this length of life, I have come across good people, I have come across bad people, I have come across people who are partly good and partly bad. But my experience is that the number of good people is very small as compared to the overwhelming number of bad people. Why has it happened? Why has honesty totally disappeared from the horizon? Why is corruption dominant? I do not know. I'm sure you youngsters must have had experience. Right from the police constable at the red signal, traffic signal, to the municipal officer who gives you a death certificate, or to a revenue officer who gives you a talati's certificate, or somebody at the even higher level issues a permit or a license. Everywhere there is corruption, rank corruption. Now, why has this corruption come about? It's an account of this feeling that somehow or the other, I have to come up in society. What is coming up in society? What is the standard in society? What is my bank balance? How many buildings can I own? How much of land do I own? How many cars do I have? How much of material does me have? Now, if that is the standard, then naturally every youngster says, I have to become fast. I have to become rich fast. This idea of becoming grow rich fast at any cost has really taken us down the path of from what used to be a very high standard to a very low standard. I remember when I was very young, my father used to tell me two or three interesting verses, and he made me memorize them, which is still sticking in my head. Wherever I go, wherever I address a public, in fact, I make it a point to go and address students everywhere and as many times as I can in universities, colleges, all educational institutions. The kids naturally ask me, say, for example, I go to the law college and talk, they say, what about money as a reward in the law profession or any other profession for that matter? Well, money is good. Money is not bad by itself. Nothing is good. If you ask me if a knife is good or bad, I will say it's good. If you want to do only cut tarkari, it is good. But if you want to stab somebody, it is bad. So it's money similarly is an instrument. The whole problem is money is an instrument for acquiring happiness. Now, I will not go into the philosophical concept of happiness. That's more complicated. I'll leave it at that. But I will just say, why is money necessary? I want to have a roof on my head, sufficient to eat, sufficient to clothe myself, sufficient to take care of my wife and children, my immediate family, and also keep happy. entertaining my friends, blah, blah, blah. Beyond that, what? What does money do to me? So it is an instrument for acquiring happiness. Now, the difference between an instrument and the objective is to be brought in mind. The objective is happiness. Money is instrument. So if I can get happiness otherwise than by money, why should I bother about money? That's what a real evolved, mature human being will think of. So there could be a man or a woman who is utterly impoverished and still be happy at heart. Very well. We leave them aside. Let us talk in terms of the average human being in society. The average human being in society says, I need money for getting happiness. Money itself is happiness, according to him. The two are immeasurably bound together. All right. So what does he do? Therefore, he says, the greater happiness will be acquired by me. The greater is my acquisition of money. Now, acquisition of money is not an easy joke. It's a long, tortuous process. But nobody wants to wait that long. Now, if I want to go from Delhi, I can go by plane, I can go by train, I can go by motor car, I can even walk. Well, I suppose walking is the surest way, but then it takes me how many days to reach Delhi? So I have no patience. I said, no, let me take a plane and reach there in 2 hours' time. Similarly, if I want to have a big balance, I must find a shortcut. What is the shortcut? Shortcut is trying to acquire money by some means which the society does not consider to be good. In fact, right from the time of the Upanishads, we have been told, Mahagrita Kasya Siddhanam. They said, don't try to grab somebody else's money. The Bible also told us, no, don't covet your neighbor's property or wife. Now, we don't follow that because we want this as our acquisition. Now, if that is the debate, how much of money is good for us? How much of money is needed for happiness is a question that arises. Now, that is an important issue which youngsters should bear in mind. I remember, this is why I am telling you, there is a very famous poet, grammarian, philosopher by the name of Bhartrihari, somewhere in the 4th or 5th century BC. He has written a beautiful verse in which he explains what is the meaning of this. He says, Akritva parasantapam agatva khalamandiram anutsrijya satam vartma yat swalpam api tadbhav. He says, without causing pain or distress to a human being, agatva khalamandiram, without having to go begging to the house of a crooked man, anutsrijya satam vartma, without deviating from the path of rectitude, yet swalpamapi, whatever little you earn is more than enough for you. Now, honestly, how many of us are willing to accept this? In fact, the great Shankaracharya, everybody has heard of Shankaracharya. We also have postage stamp issued in the name of Shankaracharya. We also have Shankara Jayanti celebrated on Vaishaka Shukla Panchami every year all over the country. What did he say? Yal labhase nija karmo pattam vittam chena vinodaya chittam. He says, whatever you get from on account of your the work that you do, he says, please be happy with it. Now, the moment let's say, I am following any profession, whether I am a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor, a taxi driver, or a police constable, or a primary school teacher, I have consciously chosen the profession. The profession has two types of rewards. One is the pleasure of doing one's work. The other is whatever is the sustenance that comes out of it, your monthly salary or compensation. Now, if I am working as a primary teacher and I start thinking, hey, how come Ambani's bank balance is so much? How come Tata's have such a big balance? How come Bill Gates has so much money at his command? How come Trump has so many hotels in his name? Why can't I get it? Now, that is ambition by itself is not bad. But then ambition, if it drives you to crooked means, it is bad. That is exactly why the Bhartrihari said, you start with this. I'm happy with whatever I'm getting. if I can get more, without doing what? Akritva parasantapam agatva kalamandiram anutrijya satambat. Now, what is satambartma? Satambat by the path of rectitude shown to us by our elders. Now, what did our elders do to you? Our elders said, I remember we used to write copy books. Honesty is the best policy. Honesty is the best policy. Nobody ever bothers about that. Now it's only the copy book. What is honesty? Honesty is doing what you are required to do with conscious effort and not trying to deviate from it for other attractions. How, let's say I'm the person who is supposed to issue a permit for something or the other. The man who comes to me has certain qualifications. The law says there are certain qualifications on the basis of which only the permit can be issued. Let's take a simple thing like a driving license. The law says that a person who has passed the driving test with who is qualified under this blah 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 should be issued. I know the man is incapable of driving. I know that he doesn't care to read the traffic signs. He doesn't properly drive the motor car. But just because he passes on a 1,000 rupee note to me under the table, if I issue him a driving license, I have deviated from my duty, and that is where it's called dishonesty or corruption. I was telling you, my father taught me another verse. But there is a famous doha, I think, I'm not sure whether it is Kabir or Rahim who said, no? Sai itna dijiye jame kutum samay, aap bhi bhukha na rahe, sadhu na bhukha jaye. He says, oh good Lord, give me this much and it is sufficient for me so that I can feed my own family. And I make sure that the Atithi who comes to me, the guest who visits me also does not go away hungry. He says, I don't want anything more. There is another interesting verse which I was taught when I was very young by my father. And that is a very, very interesting thing. It is some kind of an imaginary dialogue between a very learned man and Lady Lakshmi. All of you are aware of Mahalakshmi. Mahalakshmi is not symbolic of the race course. Mahalakshmi is goddess of wealth. Of course, that's why probably they have got the race course very close to Mahalakshmi temple also. Now, Mahalakshmi, so the learned man addresses her and says, Padme murkha jane chodada sidravinum vidvatsu kim matsaraha. He says, oh lady Lakshmi, how come you are always distributing wealth to fools? Are you jealous of learned people? You know, learned people are by definition poor. So she smiles at him and says, Aham matsarini nachapi chapala naivasti murkhe radi. I am not jealous of learned people, nor am I fickle-minded as people call me, nor do I have any great affection or love for fools. But murkhebhyo dravinam dadami nitaram. I consider always give a lot of money to fools. Tatkaranam shruyatam. Kindly, carefully listen to that reason why I do this. Vidwan sarvajaneshu pujita tanuhu. A learned man is revered wherever he goes. Murkhasya nanyagati. A murkha or a fool has nothing else. Therefore, I give him as a prop some money so that people will look at the money and give him a lot of respect. I remember when I was young, my father used to say, son, when you grow up, you will meet a whole lot of people. A lot of people with great qualities being thrown at them. Just mentally strip them of all their material possessions. If something really remains, cultivate their friendship. Otherwise, just shun them. So it's the greed and the corruption is driven by this intense desire to acquire more and more. Now, if that can be controlled, most of the problems in society will be solved. Now, since we are talking about the duties and liabilities, this is one of the fundamental duties. Now, how do I go around enforcing that by law? Is it something that, can I say, cultivate love for your friends or for every neighbor in society, can it be mandated by a legal edict? It cannot. It has to come from within. How does it come from within? It comes from within as a consistent educative factor from the time the children are born. They say that whatever is taught to you as a young kid remains with you throughout life, even if you are put into circumstances where there is some directly opposite teaching that comes about. So if you take a child who has been brought up in a parental atmosphere of honesty, it's very difficult to turn the child into a dishonest person. I'm not saying it is impossible, I'm saying it is difficult. Conversely, if I find that, take a simple thing, no, if my father were to smoke all the time, how on earth can he honestly tell me and say, never smoke? And as a child, I would say, yeah, my father smoked, my father drinks, therefore I also drink. So if I find my father and my parents are corrupt, I say, it's very normal, what is wrong in that? So that is the fundamental duty every citizen owes to the country, to ensure that corruption and dishonesty do not deviate the citizen from his required duty to the society, which is to choose whatever he wants to do and do it honestly. Now, the difficulty that I told you is that we have not educated our children. I do not know. I call myself educated. I also studied. In fact, I got probably 4 degrees to my credit or discredit. Nobody in the college ever told me that I have to be honest. They taught me a whole lot of stuff, but nobody ever told me. I do remember my parents telling me this. I do remember my primary school teacher telling me this. So even now, when I think of something, I say, let's think of what was taught to me when I was very young. Is it conformity with it? Then we'll do it. If it is not in conformity, I will not do it. So my duty to society, I chose the profession of law. I was a lawyer. I chose the profession of law and then became a judge. I was judge in the Bombay High Court. I was Chief Justice in Kerala. And I also happened to be the judge of the Supreme Court. After retirement, I've done a whole lot of work for the government, outside the government, for private parties. I always ask this question to myself and to anyone whom I meet. You may say that Srikrishna is an idiot. He doesn't understand law. He's got very low IQ. I have no problem with it. But has anyone ever said so far that he's a dishonest man? That would be the day I would be committing harakiri. I don't want to be called a dishonest man. Honesty is something, being true to your own self. If you do not maintain that, you have lost your only capital that you have in life. Now we talk of liability and the duty towards society. What is the duty towards society? When explaining what the DIYA stands for and what these different meetings or lectures stand for, you call it what? Gyan or something, no? Gyan, whatever.
So, Gyan Sabha.
Gyan Sabha. Okay, Gyan Sabha is an ideal word. Okay. So this is a Sabha. Of course, we are meeting only by virtual platform. Probably before COVID and after the lockdown is over, we will meet personally in a Sabha. And Gyan is given. Now, interestingly, what is Gyan? Gyan means knowledge. So what is knowledge? Knowledge is learning something that I do not know. Till today, I did not know something. I learned today. I have acquired knowledge. But then the question is it good or is it bad? It is good if it is going to improve the quality of your life, if it's going to improve the quality of all others around you, if it's going to improve the quality of the society as a whole, of the country as a whole, and I would take it further up and say of the entire world as a whole. That is Gyan Sabha. So that is the type of Gyan that you are supposed to acquire throughout life. How does one acquire Gyan? It's an interesting concept. Knowledge is acquired in 4 different ways according to our Shastras. One is you acquire it from the book learning. They say that 1/4 is acquired from the books, 1/4 is acquired from the teacher, 1/4 is acquired from the sahapati, the, the friends that you have in the class, and finally 1/4 is acquired by living it. So it is acquiring these quarters in each step that you acquire this full jnana. That is necessary to make you an ideal. Unfortunately, in our country, there has been so much talk of fundamental rights. Fine, fundamental rights are absolutely necessary. I do not for a moment dispute that. So there was some kind of a reaction to it, saying there should be a concept of fundamental duty. Now, I have got this Article 15, 1A of the Constitution, which has been added in Part 4A. So what does it say? To abide by the Constitution and respect the ideals and institutions of the national flag and the national anthem. What? Look at this. The whole point is people don't understand what it really means. What is a flag? A flag is nothing. Let's talk of a flag, the Indian flag. It is nothing but a rectangular piece of cloth in which you have three colors and one charka in between and Ashoka, whatever the symbol in between. What is great about that? What is great that you look at this piece of cloth and say it is great? National anthem. National anthem is what? It is just a song composed by Tagore. What is great about it? It is not the symbol per se, but the sentiment behind which is important. When I say national flag, when I say national anthem, you have millennia of centuries where the culture has been handed over to us. Millennia of traditions handed over to us. Millennia of norms that have been handed over to us. That is the one that is entitled to respect. So when the Constitution says, abide by the Constitution, it is not the book that you are bothered about. It is the spirit behind the book. That is why I said it is spiritual exercise and not merely material exercise. To cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our national struggle for freedom. So what is this national struggle for freedom? What are the noble ideals that they want? The noble ideals. Take for example, who was this? So if I ask, I don't know whether the today's generation knows. So I remember I asked a kid once and said, do you know Mahatma? I did say Mahatma Gandhi. He said, yes, I know. He is the hero of that famous film made by that famous filmmaker in England. Or somebody who's some book on which he has been written. So, for example, take Mahatma Gandhi. What is the ideal with which he fought the freedom struggle? He said, I want my country to be free. I want to live my own life. I want to be capable of inculcating my own cultural values. And I don't want to be indoctrinated by some foreigners' values, cultural and otherwise. Fine. But in order to do that, I want you people to get out of the country and leave the administration to our own people. Now, please note, what is the method that he followed? He said, Satya. Satya is truth. And Satyagraha in Gandhiji's definition is doing something by which you impose upon yourself a liability in order to morally force the other person and trick the other person's conscience. Now, I have a feeling unfortunately, I was too young at that time. I had no dialogue with Mahatma Gandhi, though I had seen him lecturing it one day somewhere in Mumbai when I was a very young kid. So the question is, it's a concept which is taken up from the Kathopanishad. In Kathopanishad, I don't know if you know the story of Kathopanishad. In Kathopanishad, there is this young boy whose father has performed a yajna and he is giving away gifts to various people. So this boy sees that most of the gifts are useless. Most of the cows that were gifted were incapable of breeding, were incapable of giving milk. So he comes to the father and says, hey dad, why are you giving this kind of useless gifts? So why don't you do this? So he gets angry and says, no, shut up and get out. I'm putting it in more colloquial form so that the kids today can understand it. Then 2-3 times he does. And then he says, why don't you give me away as gift? So the father gets angry and says, Vrityaveta dadami. I'll give you away to Yamaraj himself. So he takes it seriously. He is a very serious boy, he takes it seriously. He said, okay, you want me to give it to Yamaraj? Then he goes to Yamalok. When he goes to Yamalok, he sits there because he was told that Yamaraj is on official tour, he will not be available for the next 3-4 days. So he says, okay, ठीक है, I'll wait for him. And he sits at the doorstep. No food, no nothing. Sitting there, waiting. Yama comes back. When he sees this young boy sitting here for 3 days, waiting for him, don't forget, this is an Atithi. So he feels a prick of conscience. He says, I'm extremely sorry, oh noble boy, I'm very sorry because I made you wait on my doorstep without food or water for 3 days. Please forgive me, I am willing to give you 3 varas for 3 boons. And then the Upanishad tells blah, 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 everything is there, that will be for another day. Finally, the point that I'm trying to put across is, Satyagraha means, I will not hit at you. I will not harm you. I will harm myself. What do? I won't eat. If I don't eat, and if you have a conscience, you will say, how long can I allow this fellow to not to eat? He is going to be hurt. He is going to die one day. He is going to have all kinds of problems. Let me appease him. That kind of conscience will be awakened. That is precisely what Gandhiji did. Gandhiji did not believe, like others in the freedom struggle did, of throwing bombs at people, shooting them down, whether they were Britishers or otherwise, but by saying, no, I will not yield to an unjust rule, but I shall continue to impose my impose hardship on myself so that I will awaken your conscience by this. And that is precisely how he managed to ultimately shake the big, mighty empire of Great Britain, which boasted that the sun never set on the British Empire. Now, that is the noble ideal which inspired our national struggle for freedom. So, if you all remember the Dandi March, the Salt March, the Britishers had imposed excise duty on salt manufacturing. Poor people used to go to the seashore, get some salt, and dry it up and make some salt. The Britishers wanted to have excise duty on that. So Gandhiji said, this is poor man's food. No, don't do this. So he was opposed to it. And he said, I am opposing it because I think it is unjust on your part. So as a consequence of what? There was lathi charge. He was beaten up very badly, thrown in the jail, and incarcerated for a long time. Finally, when he was tried in the magistrates' court somewhere in Gujarat, and their history books tell us that the magistrate heard everything and then finally sentenced him, got up and saluted him and said, I'm sorry, the law requires me. My dharma is to punish you, but I know you are capable of punishing matters. Sorry that I'm doing it. That is the greatness of the human being, which has to be acquired if you want to go under 51 capital AB. Then you have to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. Now, sovereignty, integrity, and unity are territorial concepts. That, yes, if the Chinese are coming into our country and trying to take away some land, it's your job to go and fight if you can, if you physically can. That is our job. But at least you have the spirit saying that we don't want Chinese, we don't want any other person to come and occupy our country. Of course, now that has gone one step ahead, and so now we have got a concept of Atmanirbhar. So ban all Chinese goods, ban all Chinese people from getting contracts and things like that. Whether that is good or bad, only time will tell. Then defend the country and render national service and called upon to do so. That is absolutely correct. In fact, India is one of the. I don't know how many of you remember when the China first had their problem in 1962, I think, no? Or 62. I was still in college. We were all required to compulsorily enroll in the NCC to get training so that in case it became necessary, we had to go and fight at the border. But somehow it never occurred. That situation did not occur. Then to promote, this is more important from my point of view, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, and regional or sectional diversities, to renounce practices derogatory to dignity. Now, how many of us are really capable of doing this? Religious diversity is a facet of life. Now, a very interesting thing is, if you emphasize the difference between you and me, it leads to dissension, division, and hatred. But if you emphasize the unity behind you and me, now one person may be wearing a cap of this kind, one person may be wearing a cap of another kind, one person may go to his place of prayer with shoes on, another person may not go with his shoes on, and one person may be bare-bodied, one person may have some kind of tilak on his forehead. These are external indicia. But you look at the human being inside, then you will say, hey, what is he doing? He has a faith in a particular external power which he considers to be superior. And this is his path of knowledge. This is his path of what we would call devotion. And mine is something different. So fine. So if these are different, they are different. But what is integral to both of them is the path of devotion to the ultimate supreme energy or Lord or God, as you call it, which each one of us is trying to follow. That is why the famous saint by the name, by who in India, he has composed a beautiful poetry called Shiva Mahimna Stotra, in which he says, Ruchinam Vaichitriat Rijukutila Nana Pathajusham Nrinam Eko Gamyastumasi Vayasam Arnavaiva. He says, just as water can come from different sources, from this side, from that side, and all that, where does it go? Ultimately, it lands up in one ocean, somewhere or the other, after passing through devious tracts. Similarly, each human being has his or her own likings and dislikings, because of which, or his or her own impulses, traits, thinkings, as a result of which he follows a certain path. But ultimately, you are the repose for all the human beings. That is the integrating factor that they have emphasized in our cultural values. Now, the same thing is being talked of in the Constitution in Clause E of Article 51A. Then to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. This is exactly what I've been talking about for the last half an hour. The composite culture has always emphasized that, the interesting thing is, this is not something that has come to us from abroad. Although I must confess that even abroad, like for example, the French Revolution, people like Voltaire had a debate with somebody on which there was total disagreement. So he told his opponent and said, I disagree with you till I die, but I respect your right to disagree till I die. How many of us are capable of doing this? I may disagree with all of you, but am I going to say that you have no right to say this? You must follow exactly what I want. That is dictatorship and not democracy, rule of law, which the Constitution is embedded. Then you have protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. This is something very interesting. Today, everybody talks of yoga, 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 yoga. Every second street has a yoga institute. Patanjali was a great rishi. Not Patanjali is not the manufacturer of various items, fast consumer items. Patanjali was a great rishi who gave out us the principles of yoga, yoga darshana as they call it. And he in his Yoga Sutra says that if a person is compassionate and has this kind of love for his surrounding, he will be surrounded by trees, rivers, and even wild animals who will come and treat him as a friend. Now, that kind of compassionate overflows and accepts this kind of friendship from normally what they call nature fere, that means wild creatures, a tiger, a lion, a leopard, a cheetah, a snake. Somebody would be, a wolf, you would be afraid of. They would become your friends. That is the environmental friendliness. Now we have environmental friendliness in the other sense. I want to make a big factory, therefore I'll cut off all the trees, I'll dam all the rivers, and I'll dig all the mountains for iron ore, and then leave the earth barren. This is precisely what has happened all over the world. It's not something new to this country. As a result of which, there has been a backlash of various difficulties that we are facing, and that is why there has been a lot of movement abroad for going back to nature, and that you remember that famous Chipko movement and all that has started in India too, because people have realized that ultimately we can't be unfriendly towards nature. That is precisely what is emphasized in this talk. Then to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. Now, scientific temper has a very peculiar meaning to it. People don't understand it. What is scientific? Scientific means take a decision based upon reason. Now, if somebody comes to you and tells you that this happened in the world when things were not really discovered, people were told that the earth is flat, that if you keep walking toward the end of the earth, one day you will come to like an edge of a table, you will fall down from the earth. Then somebody said, no, that is not so. The earth is round. He made some experiments, proved it. Somebody said the sun moves around the earth, the moon moves around the earth and all. So Kepler was a great scientist, astronomer scientist, who was able to show it by his scientific principles, how things happen, how the heavenly bodies move, and what planetary motion is. Similarly, with regard to various natural phenomena like say tides, eclipses, day and night, seasons, you have reasons for those happening. So your scientific reasoning should be able to understand the reason for it and then appreciate nature for what it is. That is scientific term. Then to develop humanism. Humanism is what? To consider every human as endowed with the same rights, with the same sensitivity, with the same emotional factor as you have. That is what I started by saying. Atmana pratikulani paresham na samachare. This is exactly humanism. If I prick, I remember Bible says no. If I prick a needle into your hand, it causes you pain and you start bleeding. This is exactly what happens to your neighbor also. Please remember that. And the spirit of inquiry and reform. Inquiry, yes. What is happening? Is it good or is it bad? Does it really improve the quality of life? Does it deteriorate the quality of life? It is. Once you have this inquiring mind, then reform already comes. What is reform? Reform is making it better than what it was earlier. But when you want to make it better, you look at all the pros and cons. If I change it, good factors 1, 2, 3, 4. Bad factors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is the one that is going to be majority. I will not do it. If the good factors overweigh the bad factors, you go forward in that direction. That is the spirit of reform. Then safeguard public property and to abjure violence. Now, this is something that need not be told to us by a constitution. That is common sense. Please don't. The interesting thing is, we all travel by train. We all travel by. No, let's forget all the train. I remember as a lawyer practicing in the Bombay High Court, we used to go up the central staircase. So at the corner, there was a board in English saying, "Do not spit here." In Marathi saying, "Yache thuku nahi." And invariably, that corner used to be filled with pan, thuk, with spit. So this is something that we should have. Now, is it healthy practice? Is it practice that causes distress to people? Then we should not. Then is it public? No, another thing about public property. It is said that public property is nobody's property. No, look, if I have a car, I'm very careful about it. I will make sure that there is not even a scratch on that. But when I travel in the train, I note that all the walls are scratched, all the seats covers, rexine is cut off, and I go to a historical place, I find that John loves Mary is carved on that on the historical place. Whether you go to a temple or you go to a church or you go to a mosque, wherever you go. Now that is no respect to the public place, no respect to your human beings who are around you, no respect to society, no respect to the country. That is why this says to safeguard public property. It is your job. Now you may have a right to protest. That doesn't mean you have to go on setting fire to police stations, setting fire to railway stations, or to BST buses, or to aeroplanes. That's certainly not what is required to be done. In fact, it will be abjured. That is why the Constitution says abjure violence, because violence does not solve the problem. No amount of violence in the world has ever solved a problem. It is, on the other hand, non-violence that has solved the problem. So you saw recently what happened in the United States when that black man was tortured on account of what? Nothing but racial discrimination. That happens. Now this kind of thing, and we have in this country also. We are not racist in that sense, but we have our own problems. We have some sections of society we think that they should be abjured. All kinds of unimaginable torture is practiced on them. That is something that is a no-no for an honest citizen of this country. Then you have to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective action so that the nation constantly rises to higher levels of development. Obviously so. You improve yourself, everybody in the society improves himself or herself, then naturally the society becomes better. Naturally the country becomes better. There is no difficulty about it. Then who is a parent or guardian to provide opportunities for education to the child, or as the case may be, to work with it. Now, I talked of education. It is the obligation of every father and mother to ensure that the child has an education. Education does not merely mean the 3 R's. If you remember, they used to be called the 3 R's. The 3 R's are reading, writing, and arithmetic. Education doesn't stop there. Education is a process that goes on throughout your life, starting from the time you were a small infant. Now take a situation where you are just a toddler, 1 or 2 years old. Your mother is cooking in the kitchen. You go to the kitchen and try to put your hand inside the fire. Your mother says, don't do it. It is not good. It will hurt you. And that is education. Similarly, your mother will some stage tell you, boy or girl, whatever you are, be honest, be truthful. This is what is the right thing in life. That is education. And on top of it, you also learn reading, writing, arithmetic, culture, geometry, mathematics, whatever you want. And you continue with life. But don't forget, this is the core of education. How to be a good human being is the basic education for everybody. Now, these, unfortunately for us, have to be told to us by Article 51, capital A, inflated impact, Part 4A of the Indian Constitution. Interestingly, note that there is no method by which the fundamental duties can be enforced upon you by a mandate, although it is declared to be so as a fundamental duty in the Part 4A of the Constitution. Friends, ultimately, you come back to the same question. So what is it that I'm doing? Is it good or bad? The answer to that is it going to promote good in society? Is it going to be helpful to my fellow human beings? Is it going to be helpful to the society as a whole? Then it is good. If it is not, then it is bad. There is another saying by Bhartrahari which says, Ahara pratyaveksheta naras charitam kinnu me pashubhistulyam kinnu satpurushayati. Every human being, he says, should have a balance sheet. get up in the morning or maybe at night before going to sleep, he has to have a balance sheet says, Pratyabheksheta narascharitamātparah. He should judge his own character and say, am I fit to be compared with beasts or animals? Or am I compared, or is my conduct comparable to that of good human beings? And if you are sure of this, then there is no end difficulty at all. You will always make sure that you are on the right side of the balance sheet and not on the negative side of the balance sheet. That, friends, probably brings me to an end of what I wanted to talk about in this. Not that I'm very jnani or anything of that sort. This is what I have learned a little bit in my long career, and long life of almost 80 years. A few months more and I'll be 80. So I thought that it was my obligation to transmit it to you. And very interesting thing, I tell you, people think that Indian psyche is to just say, do this and don't do this. No. If you all remember Bhagavad Gita, how did Bhagavad Gita start? Bhagavad Gita started with if a war between the Pandavas and Kauravas, Krishna was there, and then suddenly Arjuna was stricken by emotion and he didn't want to, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that is all it. I am not interested in that. That for another story. At the end of 18 chapters, people had great time, I think. They wait for the war before 18 chapters are taught. At the end of 18 chapters, now finally says, I have taught you all this. Then says, Vrishyaita rasheshena yathechasi tathato. He says, think carefully about what I have told you just now. 18 chapters. Then asheshana, totally. Then yathechasi tathato. Then take a decision for yourself and do what you want. Now that is the way life is. Our duty as elders, our duty as educators, our duty as seniors is to show you this is bad, this is good, this is bad, this is good. Leave it to your choice. And we can also add the most postulate and say, if you follow this path, it will be good for you and for the country, these have the consequences. It is, if you follow this path, it is bad for you and bad for the consequences. And then you have the right to choose. You choose, and for heaven's sake, choose it according to your conscience, which you think is good for the country, which you think is consistent with your rights and obligations to be a good citizen of this country. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for that scintillating.
What happened?
From Yam Nachiketa's story to Kabir and to Bhagavad Gita and the core of Indian spirituality, that we are not the body but we are something beyond it. So very beautifully you started off with it and explained to us what are the roles, what are the duties of a citizen, and you embedded it quite well with the Constitution Article 51. So it was a really all the participants, please put your microphones on mute so that there are a few questions which the participants have posed. Two, three questions which would like to ask you. So, sir, the first question: billing situation today of this pandemic, where people have actually there is a psychological issue. They've become depressed. How do they keep themselves motivated, and what are the duties in such?
I can't hear you.
In light of in light of today's pandemic, where people have become psychologically depressed, and it's difficult for themselves to keep motivated. What should they do, or what rather should their roles and responsibilities be in such circumstances? That is the first question, sir.
Look, your responsibility is to ensure that what is your problem today? The pandemic. Your responsibility is to ensure that the pandemic does not spread. How do you do that? We keep telling you, wash your hands, sanitize your hands every time, put on your mask, don't go around crowding, no necessity to go shopping, no necessity unless it is necessary, no necessity to go to malling, no necessity to go to pubbing, no necessity to go to clubs. Not necessary that you have to necessarily go and sit in the same house where it may be possible that somebody may be infected, you may be infected. That is your responsibility today, to ensure that the problem which is affecting us, or at least a large section of the society, does not expand and we are able to contain it for the benefit of all. That is our fundamental duty.
Right. So quite a lot of sutras that you gave today. I mean, if we change ourselves, then perhaps the world will change, or there'll be a
Absolutely.
change in perception. Yes, sir.
Yes.
That's, I mean, something which the founder of Gayatri Parivar, Pandit Shri Ram Sharma Acharya ji,
Uh,
emphasized greatly on. He said that "Hum badlenge to yug badlega." It's a very small sutra, but it carries in itself the entire philosophy of humanity. And that's what great people like Shankaracharya, like Ramana Maharishi, like Maharishi Arvind, all of them have said. And you beautifully put it, sir. Now the second question which has come, sir, is uh, what are the three things that are a problem in our country today? And if we focus on these three things, then we can say that our nation will be on the pathway to become where it is today, from being a developing country perhaps to a developed nation, not just in materialistic terms, but in terms of ethics, in terms of honesty, etc. What are those three things which would want to change in our country?
Insufficient paid education. Have you seen what is the total allocation in the budget to education? It's laughable. Number two, lack of discipline. You look at the interesting thing. You go to Singapore, you'll see a lot of Indians who will behave very disciplined manner. You go to abroad, anywhere you go to England, I have traveled all over the world. Germany, Europe, France, America. They're very disciplined. But the same people, when come back to India, do the same thing, which they would never have dreamt of doing it. Why? There is lack of discipline. And discipline does not, I'm telling you, it does not come only by policeman's danda. It has to come from within. And take a simple thing. My grandson studies in England. My daughter lives in England. So he was telling me that in the school they teach you an elementary thing. That when you come to a crossing, they tell them, if it is red, do not cross. Look at right when the vehicle is coming. Look at left and cross only on the zebra crossing. Now, is this something to be followed or not followed? Is this something that is complicated? Why can't this be taught? And if it is taught, why is it not followed? Now, why is it that at the red light, nobody wants to stop? Why is it that when I'm crossing the zebra crossing, people want to whiz past on a red light? What does it show? It shows lack of discipline. No? If you have no discipline, you can never achieve anything. Lack of education, lack of discipline, and lack of integrity of purpose. Why am I doing it? That is the question. Now, if you are crossing the red light when the law says you should not do it, because the consequences are dangerous for somebody else. If you are doing it, have you ever asked yourself and say, oh, why am I doing it? Because I want to save 5 minutes time. If I do it, what happens? Somebody may die. If you compare those, when will you say that my 2 minutes are more precious than somebody's life? That's okay. Most unreasonable conduct, most easy to reason it out in your mind. Those are the three reasons I would put it.
Right, sir. And if we look today, patriotism and country first, these debates have attained a new meaning in the sense. We do talk of patriotism, we do talk of country first, but what exactly should be patriotism? What exactly is patriotism, and what it means to put the country first? If the younger generation can get a clear direction in that regard of what patriotism ought to be in day-to-day life, and what is it about putting the country first.
See, that is why I started by saying it is not the geographical territory that is the country. Because every country has got a geographical territory. Every country has got a mountain, every country has got a river, every country has got green fields, every country has got probably, some of them don't have it probably, the sea coast. So if you think that your country is great because of some inherent quality, discover the inherent quality. is correct. The inherent quality of our country, it's its cultural tradition, which has a long heritage, right? 6,000 years, 7,000 years, I don't even know where it started. But we can look at it. Although we can't study all 6,000 years history, at least the important things, great people, great minds have applied to their minds to it and told us what it is. Pick them up and make them and be proud of that. That is your country. Simply make, yes, territorial integrity is one aspect of country, but this is more important than territorial country because ultimately, it's possible for you to even outgrow this concept of patriotism, and you may say, "Yatra Vishwam Bhavat Ekanilam," where the entire world is one nest, a nidus for the entire world. And they say that no, I am Nijap Parvo Veti Ganana Laghu Chetasam Udara Charitanantu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudha is much bigger than a small country. Yes, unfortunately, what has happened is this intense patriotism has bred some kind of enmity. So, my country is good, very good. But does it mean that the other man's country is bad? Is he also not a patriot? So, why should I think that Pakistanis are all bad men? Pakistani loves his Indian country as much as the Indian loves his country. Same thing with Chinese, same thing with Japanese, same thing with the British. So it is this inability to distinguish between what is true patriotism. True patriotism is, look, I love my mother. So why should I hate somebody else's mother? It's simple logic. This is what is the correct way of looking at patriotism.
Right. So you spoke of education and sort of creating education which is more value based, which gives a correct perspective of learning, shiksha or vidya. I mean, not just being literate, but being educated in the true sense. So I would like to inform you, sir, that All World Gayatri Parivar had started a university back in 2002 called Dev Sanskriti Vishwavidyalaya, where the former President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam went in 2006. And that is when the seeds of Diya were sown. He said we need to give youth a platform where they can come and, like today we are exchange thoughts and connect themselves to nation building activities and suggest ways in which we can look at these concepts in a different manner from a more wider perspective. So sir, once the pandemic is over, I would like to invite you to come to Haridwar at Dev Sanskriti University and do pay a visit and see how the model is working, sir. That will be a great honor. And like you said, I mean, it will also resonate with what you said today, sir. uh, on that count, my yes, sir. Yeah, please, sir.
Where is the university?
It is situated at Haridwar, sir. At Haridwar, Uttarakhand. Yes.
Okay.
And yes, sir. And
Okay,
it has sort of yes, sir. Yes, sir. In fact, it has entered into MOUs with a lot of foreign universities from the Latvian countries, and it is doing great work in the field of alternative education, in the sense to make uh, domains such as yoga, such as Indian philosophy, forefront, and to present them in a manner which the youngsters don't find boring or they can relate to. So that is the idea, and that is being done there. And I mean, adhering to the true sense of right to get education. No tuition fees is taken from the students, and the university tries to do as much as it can for the students.
I see.
So it's yes, sir. So on that count, perhaps my last question would be, sir, that what is it in the field of education? What change that we need in the field of education, which would sort of transform education and ultimately ensure that we produce good citizens, we produce citizens who are more responsible from all counts.
See, I'll tell you an interesting thing. And I first joined the Bombay University. I was hardly 14 and a half at that time. I don't know, I had seen a plaque on one of the walls of the university which said, Sa vidya ya vimuktaye. It's a vakya from the Shruti, which means what? Which means that is education which leads to liberation. Yes, it is intended in a philosophy, it's an Upanishad Vakya, intended to tell us that your ultimate mukti will come only through knowledge. But then I did not pay attention to it much. Now, later on in life, it appeared to me, look, this is what you can teach the youngsters, Sa Vidyaya Vimuktaye. What is it that is education? That which you liberates you. Liberates you from what? Liberates you from hatred, from dissension, from violence, from pettiness, from jealousy, from all the evil traits of life which make you a bad man. If it liberates you, that is true education. So the Shruti has taught us something very interesting, which you have to incorporate in our life. Yes, ultimately, if you are a philosopher and you want to have mukti, then also it is true. Sa vidyaya vimuktaye. If you are not bothered about the long distance travel, at least for short distance travel, sa vidyaya vimuktaye means in the society, how do I become a good person? By negating myself, liberating myself from all these evils. That is the way I look at life.
It should liberate in a true sense. That's what true education is, sir. Once again, from the entire DIA family, I thank you very much for being a part of today. It was an absolute honor to listen to you today, and it was a scintillating talk, taking into account all the horizons, right from our scriptures to the Constitution and your own experiences. I mean, those were most important for us to hear your own experiences, and it gives a hope to youngsters like us that if we are talking in the language of what rishis of the yore spoke, then it won't go useless. Just that we need to present it in a better manner so that it relates to people from all walks of life, from all religions, from all segments. So thank you so much, sir, on that note.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, sir. And for prayer and justice, for the well-being, all those who have supported us today. There are organizations which resonate with our thoughts, and in good faith, they have supported us. Like we are supported by Podar College, by Loctopus, by Notice Bard, and Advocate Balasab Apte College of Law. We reached out to them saying that this is an initiative we are doing. Would you like to join hands with us? So, and very graciously they have joined hand with us. And I also request you to, sir, keep coming and do guide us whenever you have. I know your busy schedule. Whenever you have time, please do guide us. And with that, we'll say a universal prayer for the well-being of all. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma Krishna means we pray for the well-being of all. Thank you, everyone, and do join on Gyan Sabha every Sunday. And at 4:30, we'll be back with another notable personality to share their experiences of life and how can we contribute to our nation in whatever manner we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I shall now.
Yes, sir. And to all the participants who have joined us, give us a couple of days for your certificates. We'll be shooting out your certificates shortly and will send to you. And please note that the certificate will be in the name which you have logged on with on Cisco WebEx. So do email your proper name to us so that we can make certificates basis that name. And do join us, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, DIYA Mumbai, and all our social media handles, which are there in the chat box. Please do join and support us in whatever manner we can. We are trying to make small difference by creating this platform, by bringing in everyone together in whatever manner we can to contribute to our nation, irrespective of which stream do we belong to, which segment do we belong to, which religion, which caste, it doesn't matter. Just join us to do something out of box, take time out of your professional and personal lives, and to join Gyan Sabha and take care of yourselves amidst the pandemic, take all the safety measures, and be blessed. Thank you so much for joining us.